Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Brett. How are you? I'm fantastic.
Are
it's
you?
a Friday.
I mean,
I'm
you
happy.
are fantastic.
I had a great swim this morning. I'm
I
just
think
happy.
so.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm going to say this on every podcast now for the rest of the year.
What?
Lawyer of the Year.
I just feel like, why are we limiting it to year?
No, I don't think
millennium.
so. I think it's the millennium.
Okay.
Did you know?
So we have a special guest today. Come on now. Our special guest, thank you. Michael Feuerman is the managing director of Berger Commercial Realty's Palm Beach County office, and he's a tenant representation specialist for South Florida. So he specializes in commercial tenant representation services, and he's our first return guest to the Practice Podcast. He
Full stop. I don't think we need to say anything else.
That's his biggest. Why is that not on your bio, by the way?
That should be the first line of your bio now.
Yeah. So he was a guest on episode 15, by the way. We just released this week, episode 75, Mike. So the episode, because it's an early one, in some places, if you listen to it, it may not have a number, but it's called An Expert's Insight. Do I downsize, renegotiate, or lease new office space? And this was recorded. That was recorded in August of 2020. And we discussed market trends for office leasing, and it was a very unique environment. But since that time, Mike helped us negotiate a new lease of new space, and we're in that space and recording from there now. And if you want to come check it out, please contact us. We'd love to show you around and the product of Mike's hard work. But one thing we didn't talk about last time, Mike, is that prior to your career in real estate, you were a lawyer for 6 years. You practiced as a business trial attorney and handled all types of contract cases. So before we jump into the past 2 years and the real estate market trends, can you just tell us, how did you come to this decision to leave the law after being this, amazing trial lawyer?
Well, thanks for the introduction, Jeff. And you and I graduated at the same time, started at the same time, and you remember what it was like.
1993.
1993. And
fine year.
Early 90s, it was a busy time for litigation. I jumped right in. I had a lot of RTC work and a lot of commercial litigation, a lot of real estate related litigation. And it was a busy time down here in Miami. And I just found that I did not like practicing law. It was just not for me. It didn't fit my personality. I should specify that. I didn't like litigating. I didn't like the constant fighting and trying to get from a position where people had a dispute and one wanted to be way off here to the right, wanted to be way off here to the left. I found that if I was going to stay in law, it would have to be something transactional, or I was helping people come together. But I was very intrigued by commercial real estate. And I spent about a year, the last year of my practice, trying to find something. I just knew in my heart that I wanted to be involved with commercial real estate. And I spent about a year interviewing with different people in the commercial real estate field, development.
Lawyers or not? Did you look at, sorry to cut you off there, but did you look to try to transition to be a real estate lawyer? Is that a possibility?
The firm I left said, one of the partners said, do you want to come and be a real estate lawyer? And by that time, I kind of had gotten my head around the fact that I was going to go into brokerage. And I just, they didn't know that I was looking, or maybe they would have made the offer earlier, or maybe I would have, and that could have worked out. But I looked and I found that this is an exciting profession, and I haven't looked back. I really enjoy what I do. I mean, a case like yours, you had a problem, you had disjointed office space that you'd grown into piece by piece. You needed to solve and find something that was more contiguous and more friendly to your employees, and that reflected your corporate personality and your individual personalities, and financially can be just as rewarding as practicing law. And it's, to me, just a more fun way to make a living. I go in, I have fun every day. And to anyone who's not happy with what they do, I'm not saying you have to leave. I was single at the time. I didn't have kids. I wasn't married, so it was easy. But it's important to really at least like what you do, if not love what you do, because it's hard.
Right.
Work is hard.
I think a lot of people, and not this, I'm sure it's not limited to lawyers, but just feel trapped. They don't like what they do, or they're not. It's not that they don't like what they do, because look, it's work, it's a job. But if they hate what they do, or they're really unhappy, you got to start looking in the mirror and figuring out are there other alternatives?
You have to, because you can't really be successful if you don't like what you do, if you dislike what you do.
Yeah. I kind of went through a similar thing when I was around that same time. And I had just made partner at the firm. And I was kind of thinking, is this the right place for me? Because I also would look at other litigators and they want to fight over every little thing. And I'm just not like that. And I talked to, without getting into the whole thing, I ended up talking to somebody about it. And they were like, well, are you effective? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And she was like, can it just be that you just do it differently? You don't have to be where you fight over every little thing. And I said, well, I guess that's true, And when you start highlighting, well, what are the things you do like about it? Well, it gives me flexible hours. The good compensation is good. I can be with my family. It just affords you so many opportunities and lifestyle affordabilities that if you figure out what you like about it and what you don't like about it, you can minimize the things you don't like about it and maximize what you do like about it. So,
kudos to you for recognizing that early in your career and making that switch and finding something you're passionate about and doing it, right? It is work, as you guys said, right? So there might be days, even though you like what you do, there may be days where you think, oh man, today was a long day. I didn't like today.
They're all long days. If you're not working hard and long at what you do, it's hard also to be successful.
Yeah.
Work ethic is critical to anything.
In your field, especially, because I would imagine there's a lot of false starts. In other words, you only get paid when a deal closes, a lease is signed or it's sale. So there's a lot of times where you do a lot of work and nothing happens, right?
Absolutely. I tell people wanting to get in the business is like juggling eggs, and you're juggling 100 eggs at the beginning of the year, and you're probably left holding 10 at the end of the year. And they better be big and they better be profitable or you're not going to make a living. But, look,
and you better like eggs.
Yeah, brokerage, you better like eggs. It's all you're eating. Brokerage has its own downside and its own problems, but they don't get to me the way that the issues with litigation did. And that's a personal choice. There are people who love litigation and couldn't imagine doing anything else. I know them. I know some of them.
And you are very dedicated. I mean, I know in our situation, we started far in advance, which you have told us is the right way to go. You have to say far in advance of when your lease may expire to start exploring options, right? Either a renewal or relocation or whatever. And so you're spending all of that time hoping that a deal closes at some point, whatever that deal might be, to get paid. And in our case, I think we said it was 2.5 years.
Yeah, we just had a debate before we started recording about how far it was.
Yeah.
And
Brett was right,
of course. Brett was right. Yes, even if he wasn't right, we'd be saying that.
I mean, we should just say that all the time.
Right. So Brett was right, but we started more than 2 years before the end of our lease.
Yeah.
I was shocked to hear that.
It's not a bad strategy. When you're engaging your landlord in renewal discussions, you can start anytime, especially in your case where the landlord has a mortgage expiration upcoming and has significant vacancy. Anytime is a good time to talk to them, unless you just signed a lease.
Right.
But if you're giving the landlord extended term, they should be open to discussions with you just about any time.
But I think we started early because we were originally thinking we wanted to go buy something too. And you said, all right, if you're going to buy something, if you might want to buy something, you need to plan for that because you're going to have to build it out, the sale process, and then construction, everything else. And so.
But we wanted to explore the possibility of a relocation in the building as well, if that was possible. And I think as Mike indicated early, we wanted to find space in the building that if we could to build it out to be more who we are and what we wanted for the future, which ended up happening. It took a long time to get there.
We were on and off, I think. We were on and off for that 2-year period.
Well, and in fairness, I mean, we had a blip, right, in March of 2020 forward called the pandemic and COVID, right? And that, I remember there being days when I think we all communicated, and I know Jeff and I communicated offline, what should we do? Do we
really want to sign a 10-year lease?
Like everyone
I remember
was saying,
you asking us, are you sure?
You want to do it? Because it's 10 years and we didn't know what was going to happen with office space. We were all at our houses and nobody was working in the office. And, do you sign a short-term lease just to see what happens? We didn't.
I think that's what you were recommending. You should maybe do a short-term lease or not. But we dug deep and I think we took a risk, but it was a calculated risk and I think it paid off. And
you did.
And I think the landlord is happy with it too. So.
Sure. Well, for landlords, their buildings are valued on length of lease and the rent that tenants pay, the base rent, which equates to their NOI. And the longer the lease and the better the credit tenant, the more valuable that net operating income is and the higher return they can get when they sell it. But you took a risk. You went against the grain. And I did tell you maybe you want to look at something short term.
Sure.
And sometimes brokers will say, go for the 10-year, go for the higher. I don't practice that way.
Right,
I always want
to make more money.
They make more money. Right. But I always want to do what's best for the client. I take my fiduciary obligation seriously.
Right.
And I tell you what I think is best for you, even if it's lower commission for me, and sometimes it is, because I want a client for life. And I want to know in 10 years, if we're all still practicing, that you'll come back to me and say, hey, I need help again. And I have a lot of clients that do come back over and over.
For sure. And I think that the building had some vision too in terms of the negotiation, right, to make this space. And I mean, it's beautiful. And as Jeff said, I guess everyone listening, whoever's listening, has
invited everyone
has an open invitation to come by the office. But with your help and vision as well in terms of structuring, and we're happy, and I think the building is happy as well. And we're here for 10 years now. And it seems like all of us were... By the
way, we were here for 12 years before that. So we're a 22-year
tenant. I mean, it's pretty prescient now. We look brilliant, right? But all of us in this room look brilliant by negotiating this 10-year lease. But, we didn't know at the time.
Really sure.
No, in hindsight, it was a great decision. At the time, you were going against the grain. But in hindsight, it was a terrific decision. And you mentioned that you were looking to buy. And that, again, you're right, Jeff, that's another reason to start early, because it takes a long time to find something to purchase, the right property. Zoning becomes an issue. Parking becomes an issue. The planning and permit process, and now the construction process and cost since the pandemic, and there have been supply chain constrictions, those have all extended. So pricing is up, and the time to get permits and build out is up.
Well, and interest rates, right, for mortgages are up, especially commercial, which are always higher than residential anyway, typically.
Interest rates are up. I was just talking to a banker on the way here who told me that they tie their commercial loans to the 5-year treasury, which today is about 3.38%. And he goes about 200 to 300 basis points over that. So the minimum loan today would be at a 5.38%, probably fixed for 7-year interest rate with maybe a 25-year amortization period. At the time we were looking, you probably could have obtained a loan for about 3.25% or 3.5%. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, big difference.
And that's affecting a lot of things in the office market.
But in terms of the timing, I mean, we looked at a lot of different products too, because you showed us a few buildings that were vacant. There was 1 or 2 spaces that were above like retail, that were shells that would have been a lot of work. Some of them didn't even have AC yet.
Right.
And there was a couple that were leases that were going to be running off. So there were spaces that were going to become available in 6 months. So there's so many variables, like you're saying, about how much you need to do, but also about the product itself.
Well, and the office condos.
We looked at so many different things. Yeah.
There were office condos as well that we looked at. Yeah.
There are a lot of different types of buildings that you could occupy. And then there's the question of, do you want to occupy just the space that you're going to be using?
And then become a landlord.
Or occupy something a little larger or much larger and be a landlord and turn it into an investment.
Yeah. Well, and then you have to think about, obviously, the insurance that goes into that, maintenance as well.
That's usually passed through to the tenants, but
Well, no, I don't even mean, I mean finding people. Like now, right, if we have an issue, you call the building because they have maintenance crew. If you own a building or you own a space in a building, what do you do?
It's your headache.
Right. Now you got to find people and line them up. And what if those people aren't available or they're backed up too, which we're finding with our homes now, right? Getting people, getting supplies, getting all that stuff. So
many
it ebbs and flows. Listen, it's the market, it's current, whatever it is. And it's all dependent on what you want. It's personal, right? Some people want to buy, some people want to lease in a buildings. Just kind of depends on what you want.
Some want to be in the city, some want to be outside
the city. Yeah.
So now here we are 2 years later. Has anything changed?
Well, your space is amazing. I mean, I saw it on paper and I saw it come together in my mind, and we saw the renderings, but it's just so much nicer than I could have imagined. It's beautiful. And it really reflects.
We're very happy. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy.
You did a great job. We had a great team.
Really?
All across the board.
Agreed.
You did. You put together, and what you did that was so smart that a lot of people don't do is you engaged an architect early.
Right.
And you went even beyond the space planning phase. You did the full set of construction drawings, which were transferable from building to building. And we used these space plans and concepts and programming and layout to talk to different landlords. And it really put you ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the landlord knew we were serious. We weren't just kicking tires. Like we incurred this expense.
Well, and I think when we presented it to this landlord and anyone else or any other space that we were looking at, yes, they thought we were serious, but I think that also showed them the vision of what the space could be. And so maybe that helped in terms of the negotiation, right? Like, oh, okay, now we see this vision with partnership moving forward. We like this idea, the space. And
I think people forget the story, As lawyers, this is like what we do.
Right.
And even a lot of lawyers forget the story part of what we do is like, if you're the most effective litigators are telling a story, and this is no different. I mean, you're here talking to a landlord saying, look, these are guys that have a firm. They've grown with you. We've now expanded in this same building 4 times. Like we signed a lease, we extended again. And I guess we've expanded 3 times, but 4 separate occasions we've signed leases with them. And there's a story behind that. We've always paid our rent on time, and I would think that's who you want as a tenant, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, you were a strong client and a strong tenant, and you had a great story, and it was easy to convey that. And you're right. I was telling the story this morning about a client.
Tell us a story.
Try not to fall asleep out there. A client who was bought out, and why the landlord or landlords, because they have about 8 or 9 locations across the country, a lot of which I negotiated, why the landlord should take on the new company, because they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
When a tenant wants to assign their lease to someone who buys them out, the landlord has the right to decline. And so I'm now telling the story and it's a complicated story, but you do have to, there's a lot of negotiating and convincing, and that coherent, convincing story is a big part of it.
Wow.
So thank you for all of your help, of course.
Oh, thank you for your trust.
The work you did, and anyone out there who's considering relocating or renegotiating, call this man.
Yeah.
He will work tirelessly for you, I assure you.
We talked about this on the last episode, but just the idea of a tenant rep makes just so much sense.
Yeah.
And if you haven't used a tenant rep, you are just missing out on absolute value that at no cost. I mean, it's like, it almost, as a tenant, seems too good to be true.
It does seem too good to be true because the landlords pay our fee. You don't pay our fee.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, they'll just bake it into the rent. But they don't, because they have an advertised asking rate or an advertised sale rate or whatever the case may be. And there aren't 2 rates, one for tenants with a broker and one for tenants without. It's the same starting point for everybody. I've had situations where I've had to have the curtain pulled back, and I put a tenant into a building in Boca Raton probably 15 years ago, and they had a right of first refusal on adjacent space. And I remember I was away on a cruise with my family, and I got an email saying, do you want the space next to us? I said, well, you have to tell us the terms. You can't just say, do we want it? That's what the whole right of first refusal is. And then I realized what I was asking was, show me how I did versus an unrepresented tenant.
Right.
And not to pat myself on the back, but we did much, much better. And they were taking more space for a longer term. So there are things that we know to dig into that unrepresented parties don't know. It's like someone going to court and representing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine even from the landlord's perspective, even though they know, okay, they can't get away with anything, if you will, having a tenant rep on the other side, but I would think that they also like it. It's kind of like with us in litigation. I'd much rather have a competent lawyer on the other side so we can cut through all the BS and get to the meat of whatever it is we're dealing with. But the same thing with you. They know there's an expert that they can talk to. You know how to talk the terms. You know the numbers. They know if it's a waste of time or not if we have a tenant rep.
Right. And you also, the value of a tenant rep is they'll tell their client when they're being unreasonable.
Right.
As much as they'll tell their client when there's more on the table that we can get. Don't leave this on the table. Let's go for this. Let's negotiate here. And it's not just price and tenant improvement allowance. There are a lot of factors, as you saw, that affect your economic cost and your use of the space and your rights. And a good tenant rep will tell a client when they're asking too much.
Right.
I mean, it's not, as Jeff, I think, indicates, not dissimilar from representing a client as a lawyer. It's a professional service, right? And so you have to look at your client and say, the good lawyers will look at their client and say, listen, here's having that moment where you say, here's the weakness, here's your issue, we need to go back to them with this, and having a real conversation with your client in order to really put forth to get the best deal you can for your client.
Right. And when to stop negotiating and move forward. And that's
Right.
what the landlords like. That
Yeah.
you keep a client reasonable as a good tenant rep.
Yeah.
It's really a service. I've had a lot of landlords say that they appreciate it. And they don't dislike paying tenant reps either.
Mhm.
A lot of them say, I'm happy to pay you because you helped me get a deal done.
Right.
And they budget and pro forma a certain amount of commissions they're going to be paying out. I've even had some landlords say, I love paying commissions because I know I'm leasing up my building.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
I don't think they all feel that way. But
and you're going to bring other tenants back
Exactly.
because you can say to your other tenants, hey, I've put a client here.
Yeah, just negotiated
what
a deal
it's
on this building. And yeah, for sure.
So,
Right.
All right, so let's talk
Tell us.
about what is going on in the market down here, South Florida. There's so many different things going on down here, right? Such an open-ended question, but I'll give you the floor to kind of give us your sense of like what's going on here in the commercial office space. If that's where you want to limit it, even if or you just want to talk commercial.
let's start there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm by no means an expert in residential. I did just
Right,
buy
so
a house and I'm renovating it. And I don't recommend that to
congratulations.
anyone. Well, thanks. But it's a brutal process.
It is. I know. Yeah.
But I really know nothing about residential other than when I buy my own house. But there is a lot happening in the commercial market.
Yeah.
And I'll stick to office. So if you look at vacancy rates, and I'll stick to South Florida, in the Tri-County area, they're all below 10% vacancy rate, which is very healthy. It's a sign.
What just for comparison purposes, do you know like what would it have been 3 years ago or 5 years ago or
Probably 12, 14%.
typically 12, 14 in just general times, right?
Right. And difference, now I'm talking about every office building in each county
Mhm.
Right.
and class A, B, and C.
Right.
If we break this down into just the central business district
Right.
or downtown area, if we break it down into Brickell versus downtown Miami versus Cypress Creek in Fort Lauderdale, they'll have different vacancy rates. But I'm talking about the broad
On
district.
average,
General
right.
average,
Yeah, on
right?
average.
Okay.
And there could be some that are doing much worse than others.
Right.
In general, though, the three counties are below 10% vacancy. And in fact, Palm Beach County is below 8%, which is very strong, very healthy, in part because there was no real overbuilding after the Great Recession. Lenders were very disciplined and developers were very disciplined, but they probably would have been less disciplined if the lenders were free with the money. But
the lenders kept them in check.
There's
right?
also less commercial space up there, no? Right?
There is, yeah. So Palm Beach County is about a 58 million square foot market. Miami-Dade's about 112 million square feet. But as a percentage, they're doing
So we talk about vacancy rates, but the other way to look at it is it's 92% occupied.
That's right.
You know, like it's a pretty impressive number.
It's strong. And with that comes...
I like how you did that.
You like that?
Yeah, that was impressive.
Like I did that in my head.
No, that was
high level
math.
That was very
That was
impressive.
high
I didn't
level
even
math.
see a calculator come out. That was good.
I couldn't have done that.
Do you see the abuse I have to endure?
It's crazy.
Come on, it really is.
So what that means is it's getting a little bit tighter for tenants and a little bit tougher. But if you peel back the layers of this onion, you'll see that a lot of deals that were done over the past, probably 2-3 years since the pandemic, let's say, are short-term deals. Because unlike you who committed to 10 years or 9 years, the
Smart people. No,
smart people in hindsight, the vast majority of tenants don't know what's going to be and don't want to lock in a long-term lease. They don't know if all the employees are coming back. Some of the employees are coming back. There's still a struggle, a push and pull. Employees want to work more from home. Employers want them in the office. Is there going to be a hybrid model? And if there is a hybrid model with people working at home some days, are they going to come in and have their own office? Are they going to hot desk and share an office or a workstation? So some companies like Apple are saying, and we're going to find out on Tuesday what happens, is there going to be a mass walkout? But they're saying post-Labor Day, everybody back in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday. No more discussion. And there have been some false starts with that. When Omicron came out, they had to pull back on that. But few companies are saying it. And so we're going to see what happens. And we're going to see if this vacancy rate holds and if people sign long-term leases and make decisions.
Right. Well, there's also been, through this, at least in South Florida, a mass migration into South Florida.
There's been a very strong net migration to South Florida, people looking for more freedom to work. I'm not making a political statement. There have been more restrictions in other states like California, New York, and we've been the beneficiaries of that. So a lot of firms have moved down here. In general, a lot of wealth management, hedge fund, finance firms.
Yeah.
Tech?
Tech,
too,
yeah.
Well, but the
real-
former group, what I was
Right.
mentioning, moved to West Palm Beach in general.
Yeah.
Right. And then the tech firms.
Because they all had a grandparent there already. So they had
They have their estates or
Right.
A lot of them have homes in the West Palm on the island.
Not
They like the
please, West
lifestyle
Palm.
there.
Boca. Right.
Palm Beach.
Boca. And a lot of tech firms have moved to Miami.
Mhm.
And a lot of other firms too. Blackstone, for instance. Remember,
Sure.
we looked at a space
Yep.
in a building where Blackstone had leased 2 floors, and they ended up buying both buildings.
Yeah. Like, yeah, 2 floors not enough. We want the whole building.
The Miami Central office.
Exactly.
So there's some spillover, but in general, that's the migration we've seen.
Mhm.
And with that has come high demand and some new construction. So Stephen Ross and related bought up several Class A trophy office towers in downtown West Palm Beach. They're building other buildings. They built 360 Rosemary, which they quickly leased up. They're building another one on Olive in West Palm Beach. They're quoting rents over $100 a square foot.
Wow.
Right?
I heard that. What's the new building on Brickell that's almost done?
830 Brickell
Yeah.
is also quoting
Yeah.
rents between $85 and $100 a square foot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Wow.
amazing.
That's where some of the law firms that have opened new space are
Mhm.
leasing, right? At least I've read some of that. 60, 70, 80,000 square feet.
Right.
Yep.
Like
So
you'll appreciate this. We had a guest on the podcast who's an older lawyer, a veteran, and he right next door here, you can look out that window, 1 Biscayne Tower. He was the first tenant in that building at $5 a square foot.
that's cheap.
That's awesome.
That's cheap.
Love
I
that.
mean, what a great story.
So you look at this report that I have here. I ran on CoStar last night.
Man, this guy comes prepared.
I love it. I know.
came-
That's what makes him a good tenant rep.
I know.
You
don't
were
see-
always prepared.
I don't see any
we were
notes
very
or
impressed by
reports
you.
in front of you.
I have. They're all right here. Man.
All in the head.
Right here.
That's why I'm the only
Mine too.
return guest.
Mine too.
All right.
Exactly. That's right. You're the only return
If you want to be a
guest.
return guest in the
Come
podcast,
prepared.
bring notes.
That's
Come
right.
prepared.
But
We always tell our guests not to prepare, by the way.
oh, really?
Yeah. And Mike,
Should I throw this out?
No.
no.
You're about
right.
to drop some knowledge. I want to hear it.
I'm going
This
to
is
drop
what
a
makes
stat.
you
So
different.
of the top
Mm-hmm.
20, I'm talking in terms of square footage,
Mhm.
the top 20 office leases that have been done this year in 2022, 16 of them or 80% were in Miami-Dade. And I'm looking at 830 Brickell. They've got 3 of the top 8 and 3 of the top 10.
830 Brickell. That's a new
That's
building.
the new
That's
building.
the
The new
construction,
building.
Yeah.
Right.
And it says that Banco Santander took 95,000 square feet. Citadel, which moved from Chicago
Yeah.
in a dispute over ease of doing business, I understand, also took 95,000 square feet. I mean, these are not small leases. So Miami is really hot.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
It's a real thing. This is not just, I mean, if you're signing a lease for 95,000 square feet, and that's real.
That's
no?
not a test case. That's not
That's not-
dipping your toe in the water.
No.
That's a move.
And that's not a year. Like,
commitment.
that's a long-term lease, I would think.
It's
no?
got to be long term. It's got to
Right.
be 7 to 10 years, I'm guessing. They don't report that, but I think this is changing the face of the South Florida office market for the foreseeable future. This is
Mhm.
not a blip. As you said, this is not, okay, we don't like it here, we're going back.
So any tenant, how does that translate to advice? So if you have a lease that's expiring in the next couple of years, you should start looking now, or
Yeah, the office market is getting tighter. And if you want to be in South Florida, you should be looking early. There's no question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's exciting. I think it's great. I think it's an exciting time for South Florida, all this growth and all these new people here.
It's
As
got to be
long-
great for your business.
Well, our business arises mostly out of disputes.
Mhm.
So
Disputes
And-
and distress.
disputes and distress, exactly. And right now, these are good economic times. So we're busy with litigation, but the insolvency practice has been slower the last couple of years. The economy's been ticking and everyone's predicting a recession, but we're just not seeing it yet, right? So,
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I agree with Jeff. I think these are exciting times. I'm sure you feel it too. If you're getting calls and you're going out and wanting to lease space and representing tenants for new space or relocations or whatever it is, I think it's great. I would love to see more industry. You always look back 5 years ago or 10 years ago in Florida and it was like, well, what industry is here?
Right.
What industry can support a greater population, more businesses coming down here, more sophistication? And there really
well, it was always
Wasn't.
tourism.
Yeah, well, right. Other than tourism.
was our main, right? But now it's like
Right.
It's just much more broad and diverse.
Well,
You have
hopefully.
finance,
Right. And
tech.
hopefully that sticks,
tourism,
right?
right.
That's the idea. Is
Right.
the goal is to have them really put a foothold and not just sort of dip the toe, even for law firms, right?
Right. Yeah. Law firms are
Yeah.
moving here at an incredible pace.
Mhm.
We've seen many of the AmLaw 100 firms open offices here in
Yeah.
the last 6 months, I would say. But in this year, 2022, we've seen several of them open offices here.
Yeah, I'm also
And so-
aware of some that are looking around for space here as well.
Right. And
More, right? More, yeah. I mean,
We get calls, hey, do you want to open the Miami office of X firm? And we've had those conversations as well. And so they're coming. And I think they're going to continue to come.
Oh, so firms that want
So
to
we should tell them to call you. It's one way to open an office is,
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than organic growth,
Right.
an acquisition.
right.
Right.
A lot of them, I think, are opening because one or more of their lawyers have moved here, during
But
Or
they're
their
also-
clients are opening.
they're following their client, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying in terms of industry, right? That's why you see a lot of the estate planning lawyers, opening offices down here because their clients are either moving down here or spending more time down here. And so they feel like they need to have offices down here. But larger firms that are full service are moving too. So, okay, so how do they substantiate all of those lawyers and all those and high hourly rates? There's got to be industry that's going to feed that here, either in South Florida or in Florida, period.
And not just the individual clients. I would bet that whatever law firm does the majority of, even a significant minority amount of the work
Mhm.
for Citadel,
Sure.
who's completely relocating here,
Yeah, they
is
are.
going to
Yeah.
open an office here.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
They're going to have to follow them or risk
Wait,
losing.
my guess is they may have already done that.
And
right?
I would think that we would know because they would have called Mike Feuerman to help them negotiate.
Well, I'm going
the
to
new
call them
lease.
today.
Yeah. I mean, big international firms that are, again, not the old days. We've talked about this on other podcasts is they'd open a small office or they'd bring in two partners from another firm and open up and say, oh, this is our gateway to Latin America.
Right.
But it doesn't
This seems
seem like they're doing that.
This seems different. They are.
It does seem
They're
like-
opening offices. They're signing long leases of large square footage spaces, and so they're making much more of a commitment to the location here. So,
And for them, $100 a square foot, if you're coming out of New York City, is not a big price tag.
Right.
right. So it's driving up the prices for
Everywhere.
us.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It
Thanks
is.
a lot, New York.
So what are you seeing in terms of the people that are calling you? Are you seeing them wanting to be in the urban? I mean, I'm sure it's spread out, but generally speaking, urban core, are there people coming back? Are they planning for people to be in the office full-time, part-time? Like, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of people who have decided that they're going to be doing hybrid work
Mm-hmm.
going forward and they want to downsize. So I recently sold a building for a client that was 72,000 square feet and relocated them into about 20,000 square feet. Now, they
Mhm.
weren't using all of the 72,000, but they didn't even need half of that.
Right.
And some of that was storage space. But
Right.
they were able to condense, and they've, at this point, a little over 2 years after the onset of the pandemic, people are coming to grips with the fact that some people are going to stay working remotely, and they're right sizing. They're just taking on different
Right.
space, different size space, different configuration,
Mm-hmm.
and they're starting to make decisions,
Right.
long-term decisions.
But it seems to be some balance because you have some downsizing and some moving here. And so those two competing forces are creating some equilibrium in the market.
Definitely. So, the vacancy rates speak for themselves, right?
Yeah,
Right, right.
exactly.
So there is demand, and it's coming from outside. And, you said that this feels different than the past.
Mhm.
Generally, in the past, Miami has been more of an international market with Latin American headquarters
Right.
and doing a lot of international business. Now it feels like it's becoming a domestic center
Right.
of business,
Yeah.
not just international.
And the international's still coming. It's just now we also have the domestic migration. So
Right. So
yeah.
that's competing and that's driving up prices.
Yep.
And there's quite a bit of demand. So, the people that I'm talking to that are retaining me are a lot of repeat business. I am seeing some subleasing. I am getting retained more than I used to sublease for that reason. People, the current space isn't working for them.
Right.
And in some cases, they want to expand. In other cases, they want to relocate or downsize.
Are you seeing a lot of sublease space or opportunities, I should say, on the market now?
There are a lot. The difficulty with the sublease is it's got to be, you have to take it as you find it.
Yeah. It's got to be a perfect fit almost, right? Like it's,
Right.
yeah, you got to find that.
It's got to be almost a perfect fit. And if you're going to do work to it, it's going to be out of your pocket because
Yeah.
the sub landlord,
Mhm.
the current tenant, doesn't want to pay They're already taking a hit. You're going to get it for less than what they're paying, generally speaking, even in a market like this. And you're not going to have expansion rights. You're not going to have renewal rights because they don't want to renew and continue to subsidize your rent.
It's luck. The stars really have to align for that.
It's hard work to find a subtenant for space.
Yeah. The stars aligned for us, Mike, as we found you and you found us this space, and we're very happy. And we're happy to have you back on the podcast.
I'm happy to be.
Will you agree to be the first 3-time podcast guest?
Absolutely.
Wow, he jumped right on that and said yes. I would have held out.
We're going to wait 2 more years.
No.
It's fine.
It's not. We're going to wait. We need you in 2-year doses.
Well, these notes I have are going to be stale by then, so I'll have to do it again.
You have to print out a new. That's right. That's right.
If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review, subscribe, follow us wherever you listen to your podcast, and share the podcast with your friends and family. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Nelson.
Thanks, Nelson.
You're the man.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Nelson.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit bastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @BastAmron.